call this special meeting, the Economic Development Commission to order. It is 6:02. The first agenda item is to vote on the April 11th minutes that Tony circulated previously.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
No discussion.
No discussion. Okay, great. All right, so we did want to go through a couple of chair updates. There's been a lot that's happened since we last met on April 11th. First of all, I apologize for rescheduling our meeting on May 9th. I was out of town that day, way out of town. So, a couple things. First of all, I have circled back. We did speak with Mika and Dale earlier this week. There's no update on the bar grant yet. It should be any moment. We will have an update on that. So as soon as we know, we'll let everyone know where we are on that. Secondly, did want to talk about the 2030 walk. I know Chatty is the only one that wasn't in attendance, and Steve and Brian, obviously. So, general thoughts, impressions. I just wanted to kind of open it up for folks.
It was eye-opening to see, like we've been saying, you could see it on paper, but to actually see what the plan was and walk through it and actually and physically being there and it brought it to life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It also was pretty enlightening afterwards, trying to think about the cost factor that's going to come in that weren't necessarily considered if you want to look at that at the planning stage.
Right.
Which obviously could be some setback for the town's purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And then trying to deal with the state and become involved because you're looking at that state road, even into Bradley Road, should be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. I mean, we know the LOTSIP grant is about $10 million, and there was some discussion that might not cover all of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Scott, you had some insights on the sewers and
But to that on the 10 million, the only thing, I don't know if you guys heard it the same way I did from SLR when they made the presentation in house in the meeting room. But I thought he said that it may come in a lot lower than the original 10 million that we were thinking of, the actual what we might get. The year. So I don't know if I heard it that way. So that would be something I would maybe worth clarifying. In other words, are we really getting $9 million to build it? It's going to cost more. Are we going to get some? Because I thought I heard substantially less at that meeting. That when the consultant was showing them up on the slides, that he says it's going to be nowhere near 9 to do the modal paths. Because I think it was like $875,000 for the traffic light at Bradley.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that's only one of that's only 10%.
Right.
Or 11% or something like that.
Right.
The other, I just made 2 observations during the meeting. I don't know, it was hard because you had to sort of, the traffic noise and stuff like that. But I was just wondering about a couple of things that got me thinking, looking for the sewer covers to make sure that our plan, if we dig up the road, that we dig it up once the best we can, that we know at the time. So for instance, if like the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority has got only 8-inch pipes, and they'd love to have 12-inch someday, and we're going to be right there near their pipes or something, or we're going to shut the roads down anyway. Maybe that's the time that they, maybe there's some synergy and coordination for those kinds of other infrastructure projects. The other thing that got me thinking was seeing some of our businesses down there and some of the, you can see the little monitoring wells, and so there's been some environmental issues to be looked at down there, and could that also be part of this process that we're going to see impact it?
Right.
Because I don't know, and I think SLR said that they were going to look into whether we're going to get required to do environmentals, like if you're removing stuff to put the sidewalks in because you're putting crushed stone in, right? So you got to remove something.
Right.
Then where's that going? And is that clean stuff? And can that just go anywhere in my playground, or can that go?
Right.
Does that have to go down the next? Go to Vegas? I mean Nevada.
Right.
But, so.
There were some interesting, I think, nuances, specifically when you go down Bradley, right? And we talked about where Toll Brothers is being built now, right? And one of the things we talked about was they built all these sidewalks, right? And we mandated that they build these sidewalks. Now they're going to get torn up for the multimodal path,
Right.
right? It could be some potential issues there. The other thing is, you know, when you actually see the traffic patterns and you see where the light is going to go. I actually took a spin this morning right around rush hour to go down just to the dry cleaner. Right? And you start to think about anything getting slower down there.
Right.
It's could be a challenge, right?
I-
It could
I
make
also-
a bad situation worse.
Right.
I also took my son to JFK last night, and you know, at like 6 o'clock, I was on the Van Wyck, you know, across Bronx, you know, the White Star Express, and then coming back, and that's traffic. No, so I think there's always some of the traffic is, you know, perception.
is.
Some you know, 3.5 hours and just
Right.
stopped.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the traffic down there is not optimal as it is.
It's
And-
not.
And so anything that we do, I think we have to keep that in mind and definitely not make it worse.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, some of this intentionally is to slow the traffic
Right,
down.
and I
right?
understood.
So people
I understood
see
why. Yeah.
what's going on, right?
But
The extra traffic light, the narrowing.
something that's definitely going to have to be thought about and considered a little bit more strongly
Yeah.
before we actually make
The other thing
final
that-
decisions made.
I had not really considered till I was down there walking was Litchfield.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no major changes happening to Litchfield. So
No.
the multimodal goes, you know, down Amity and cuts through Bradley, and then it stops when you get to Litchfield.
Right. And that was explained because there wasn't room to.
There's no
expand.
room.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it could almost appear to be unfinished.
Right.
I would think. So I think there's some challenges, and I think SLR heard that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you know, as an EDC, this is coming our way.
Yes.
Right. In terms of how do we carry this forward and bring it to life, and you know, we'll talk a little more about that next. So I think it was good to actually walk it with them and to see it.
Scott, is this their final plan, or is this just, hey, this is what it could look like, kind of?
This is pretty final, because they're planning to go. I mean, they're pursuing the grant, right? And that will happen, I believe, this summer.
And I apologize for missing it, but when they did this plan, I'm trying to fact this, did they consider potential changes to zoning, the business climate, the residential climate, all that stuff down there, or is this just making the sidewalks and roads look prettier?
So, sorry to cut you off. I would say zoning, no.
Yeah.
You know, there's another piece to this, Chatty, which is the placemaking, right? Which is what are the design elements, right? There are some other things and that is a different consultant, okay? Things like more green space and kind of a cut through that will connect Amity to Litchfield, but almost go through like where Crest and Nebco are, right? To almost create like a pseudo closed road type of a. So, sorry. From zoning, with the placemaking, a lot of what was considered, and we're going to talk about this tonight, was mixed use. Okay, and that is how we would build this out. So this area is not currently zoned for mixed use. So it is a bit of a challenge, right? But this is really just the infrastructure, traffic.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. Last week I attended a commercial real estate broker networking event that was held here. Jeremy Rosner, and he actually got us invited to that. Mika spoke for about 5-10 minutes to probably about 40 or 50 commercial brokers from around New Haven. So, Cliff, like you were saying the other night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we engage them a little bit more? It was interesting to hear, their knee-jerk reactions to Woodbridge were, what's going on with your country club, right? And what's happening with your zoning. Those are the two things that were really top of mind. But this is a group, as we go forward, better connecting with them, because they help steer, like, I want to open a business. Okay, well, why Woodbridge versus Orange versus, right? So it was a good networking event, something that we're now plugged into, and maybe we can go attend a little bit more. And Cliff, you did have an interesting suggestion the other night, was looking at some of our vacancies that we have right now, specifically like Wheeler's, the old UPS store, which still has the flag sitting out there, right? Like, why are these still vacant? Wheeler's been vacant since pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, at least 4 years.
So I think one thing we can do is I'm going to reach out to Jeremy and see if he'll, I believe those are his, or he's connected to that somehow, and just get some of the learning.
And there's also the two banks down there, 194 Amity Road, which is the Citizens Bank.
Right.
And then the old, I believe it was the Webster Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Four buildings right in the row.
Well, thank you for reminding me. So that, where they held the broker networking event in the old Citizens
Yeah.
Bank. I got the directions to go, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be Levy Miller, right? And it was like, it pulled up at the Citizens Bank. Like, this can't be it. And so they're, actively trying to lease that space out. And that's sort of what they do, is they go to, here's a property that we have, and they can kind of mill around a little bit. But Jeremy gave us some of the history. Like, that was an old, like, Ponderosa Steakhouse or Bonanza or one of those places.
I remember.
Back in the day. So
I've eaten in there.
it's corny, but you hear it and you're like, well, why couldn't we have a better restaurant down there? So it's connecting with that group, so they're thinking a little more broadly than I have to put a bank in here, right? That's sort of the easy. It was a bank, so a bank moves in, right? All right, getting a little off track. So Scott, did you want to talk? You also attended the fireside chat with DECD and Rex Development meeting.
And I also attended the Greater New Haven. Maybe I'd start with that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So Greater New Haven Board Chamber of Commerce meeting. Steve Fontana. I've never met him, but he was for the city of New Haven. He was, I believe, their deputy or economic development director, and he made an announcement that he was going to West Haven the next day. So, but he talked about really, everybody talks about their successes, right? So he talked about his successes for New Haven. He said that there's been an increase in housing units of 1,000. He said not gentrification, and there's been no displacement. And he said housing is key. He talked about that we should think neighborhoods, not necessarily projects. That was one of his comments. And he's talked about the need for mixed use because you need it to pencil out. So the only thing really I heard on business was, of course, the airport. And he talked about how the airport seems to be making now New Haven actually a destination for people traveling to New Haven, not as much as they've increased the locations we go to. But actually those locations are starting to come into our New Haven area. And so that's something maybe for us to think about, is if, if that's the case, have a chance to see Woodbridge when they come visit us as well. And the only other thing on the business side beside the housing front was the $830 million neuroscience investment that the hospital and probably / Yale, I mean, it's all got to be connected somehow, but $838 million in the neuroscience, which is at the old St. Rapes. So that's a real number of buildings. I know from my perspective, when I was working for Yale, that when they learned their lessons, when Yale got run down decades ago, that when they do make those investments to put up those kinds of structures, they know that they got to keep them up because it's more costly to rebuild them 10 years or 15 years later. You've really got to, so if you're going to put in 830, they're thinking about all sorts of staffing increases, probably maintenances and so forth. So it's probably a really economic number, not just that they're building $830 million for taxation, well, because it's probably not going to be taxable, right? But it's going to be an economic driver for the people that work there, new jobs.
Was he focused on New Haven County, or was this?
He was New Haven. He was the
Okay.
director of, so he was the speaker for New Haven. And then going on to West Haven, he was just hired for West Haven, and he made that announcement.
Okay.
I did go up to the fireside chat with Daniel O'Keefe. He's the new Commissioner of Economic Development for the state of Connecticut. He replaces Alexandra Daum, who is now at Yale University in charge of university properties, New Haven affairs. His conversation was more sort of statewide in terms of, he mentioned like fuel was going to be an issue for Connecticut, that we need to be competitive with our neighboring states. I'm thinking kind of maybe that, I don't know how that relates to us. I may be naive, but it does. But that was one of the things I took away from it. He began his talk talking about, though, that he was a big proponent of workforce housing. I know that housing used to be part of economic development 20 years ago. In the early 2000s, housing was not, there was no Department of Housing, right? It was economic and community development, and housing 20 years ago was under DECD, essentially. So housing obviously is a big driver right now, and it's still part of economic development, but it's a separate department. But he did touch on workforce housing, and I'm not quite sure, but I think workforce housing is 120 or 125% of AMI. So he was touting that that's a real economic engine, is workforce housing. So it's not 100% or less than AMI. I'm not going to get into the merits of his argument, but he mentioned that, and of workforce housing.
Mm-hmm. So what AMI? Can you clarify?
Oh, annual median income.
Okay.
So
okay.
Housing is affordable when you pay no more than 30%. Let's, for round numbers, call it a third. That's why whatever you make times 3 is usually what you can afford on your mortgage. Mm-hmm. So in other words, housing is affordable when you spend 30% on housing, because you got to eat, you got to get to work, and all that kind of stuff. So they come up with this annual median income for different areas and for the statewide average. So for instance, I could be wrong in the exact numbers, but let's say for a single person, the annual median income is, let's say it's $80K. So let's say it's $84K for easy math, right? So you divide it by 12, that's $7,000, right, a month, right, times 30%. So you can afford housing costs of $2,100. Mm-hmm. That would be what they would say you could afford making $84K. So if the annual median income around this area, like for instance, the household median income is 160 in Woodbridge, but the annual median income is like in the 80s. So at a 120, you're talking close to 100 probably for a single person. That, and then you obviously do the math there. So that would be affordable for that income level. And of course, if you're in, you make $60,000, that's $5,000 a month, right? Then 5,000 times 30%, that's $1,500 a month in rent. So if you're making 60, affordable would be $1,500 a month, because you would be at much lower. You may be at 70 or 80% of AMI. So that's what AMI is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Those were the 2 things I went to.
Okay.
Oh no, there was a third thing I went to actually, or listened to. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, you can speak to that.
So in Fairfield County, they ran the Housing Collective or something like that, but they ran a talk on housing as an economic driver. And just, there's a theme you're getting from me, but at the same time is, I went there, so I thought I'd mention it. They mentioned housing is very important to the household budget. They talked about that they're, down in Fairfield County, and especially Darien, that they've had a very good reaction to having mixed uses and work and live sort of walkable communities down in Darien. I knew that from my past days and my past work life. They talked about some successes they had, that there was some immediate resistance to building communities in an inclusionary zone of people with differing abilities, housing for people with differing abilities. And there was lots of objections to that, and that was later embraced, with successes. So, they were again talking about, build neighborhoods, and some of those shining beacons will become success stories that later lead to less resistance and really lessen the fears. So they had some good good results about that. They talked about the balancing act of parking and economic development, and all those things are tough and thorny issues. But that was pretty it. It was a housing speech as well. But I thought those were two that were pretty relative to us about successes that come from little resistance at first, but once you see something good done, block parties, they had bands, and it was an annual event that they started to go to in these housing developments and neighborhoods.
What was that meeting, Scott? Oh, it's okay.
No, it was. I'll get that to you, but it was Yvonne Klein. She was the first commissioner of the Department of Housing back in that early 2000s. She moderated it for, I think it was called the Housing Collective in Fairfield County, and it's kind of a think tank. And she moderated it, and they had some developers from the Darien area and the Stanford economic development person, and they talked housing as a driver.
Yeah. I have it in here. Yes, that was the email that you had sent.
Yeah.
So, okay. Next, what I wanted to move into, next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about under the Woodbridge Economic Development Plan, the town planning consultant, which, there's been a lot of talk about that, and we are in the process of hiring the consultant. They're in the midst of sort of hammering out the contract and what that's going to look like. But back in end of April, I had the chance to sit in with Dale, Mika, and Tony to interview a couple of different town planning consulting groups that came in and responded to the RFP. So what I wanted to do was just ground everybody in what was the RFP for the town planners, and then the group that we selected, I want you to just kind of get a flavor for what their response to that was. Okay, so I'll just highlight this as we go through it. But the key thing to take away is what you're going to see was the RFP and what they responded with, and we selected them. There's still a process now of sort of finalizing exactly what they're going to do. Okay, so that's really like the next step, and I will be engaged in that in probably the next week or so, right, and kind of hammering everything out. But really important is that a lot of this is pointed towards EDC, right? And I'm really excited about it. So if you look at the overall proposal, right, the intent, I meant to highlight this for you guys. The intent here is to form a comprehensive and holistic vision for the future of Woodbridge, right? It's a big project, right? But we do know that the POCD is coming up, right? So this group will get involved with that. But I think my own opinion is one of the things that we really need as an EDC and as a town is like an aligned vision and where are we going after, right? To help kind of make the strategic choices. So that's really a big part of this role. And then you get into the specific scope that was laid out, right? Developing and implementing strategies to retain existing business and recruit new companies and developers. Sounds pretty familiar, right? It's like we've been business attraction, business retention. Guiding and implementing the redevelopment opportunities for the town. Engaging new businesses seeking to relocate or expand their operations. And then importantly, maintaining that database containing available land, buildings, and contacts. Tony's been involved with trying to assemble that to a certain degree, and it's a little challenging to have like one central what's vacant, what's not vacant. It sounds very simple, right? But this group will kind of take that project on as part of that and maintaining it. So also really important. Then planning and developing strategies, working with the first selectman's office, attending our EDC meetings as required, right? The POCD, as I mentioned, developing resources to promote local workforce development, engaging stakeholders in the economic development process. So a lot of this, right, is really going to be geared towards us, EDC, and putting together that economic development plan for the town, right? So, and we're in like meeting 4 is our reconstituted group, but what's exciting is, and we'll get into Goldman and York, who was selected, we really are bringing some real firepower to this. The more I learn about them as a group, the more excited I am about what's coming, right? So they're really going to bring that to the table. So the next was just their scope and their response to all of this, and their response was 28 pages. So I did not want to go print all that out for you,
Thank you for
today.
that.
I'm happy to email it to share, but I think the most important thing. They talk a little in here about the core elements of their work, the business development strategies, redevelopment and funding opportunities, new business development, community economic development strategies. If you get to, there's a page here that shows their 5-step planning process. When we got the response, this was what was really impressive to me, was this is their process and how they go through this, right? And really starting with where are we today? Chatty, the last time we met, you were like, we need to get grounded in like, where are we, right? So they're going to kind of come in with a fresh perspective.
Good.
And give a lot of like, why are we where we are? The vacancies that are here. I mean, this is what they're going to bring to the table. Where do we want to be in the future? Really the visioning piece. How do we get there? That's really the strategic element, right? So we'll work with them on this, but really, being quarterbacked by experts, and then measuring for improvement, the metrics, and then finally implementations, and really having a clear action plan on how we make all of this happen. So again, I'm excited to be a part of this, to get them in here. It's going to happen really, really fast. Like I would say by July, they'll be here. Maybe even our June meeting. It's very possible. Although we do have a dedicated agenda item for June, but they'll come in. We'll get to meet them, and then I want to kind of get going on this, right? So the other interesting thing is they will be part of their scope is the POCD, right, which Scott spoke to last time. So that economic development will definitely be infused into that 10-year POCD that's coming. The last thing I had on here, really just for your reference, is I pulled out, they had, again, 28-page proposal, so they had lots of different examples, and you can read through this on your own, but one of the things they really spoke to was what they've done in East Granby, okay? And what's nice about Goldman and York is they're based out of East Hartford, so they work with a lot of different Connecticut communities and have worked. Their business, they're like part advisors, and then they also have brokerage, right? So they're actually out marketing commercial real estate at the same time that they're advising. So they were engaged by East Granby, and you can sort of read through, but I think it sounds very familiar.
Looks familiar.
Yeah, to where we are. A lot of how do we maintain these elements of that town that everyone enjoys, but then driving the commercial base. So I'm excited about Goldman coming on, and I just wanted to share this with you. You can kind of read it. I'm, like I said, happy to send you their full proposal and all the other backgrounders on it.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Well, I'll route it to everybody with
Thank
the
you.
full proposal. But that was high level. Any questions?
That they came across. They impressed you very much. I mean, how much experience do they have doing this? Like, could you speak to that?
A lot.
A lot. Yeah.
I wish I could give you like years,
Okay.
but when you see, there probably were 8 to 10 different projects that they highlighted that
Okay.
were very similar.
Okay.
And again, they're across the state. They know kind of the ins and the outs of where funding is. They understand the commercial real estate markets. you know, one of the interesting things is they're like, oh, you know, so when, for example, when it comes time to fill out 2030, they've got their built-in network and connections, right? It's not going to be the 6 or 7 of us like dialing for dollars, right? Like they can point folks
Okay.
in our direction. So I don't want to oversell or overstep because again, all this needs to be hammered out.
Okay.
And also, from what I understand, we advertised an RFP for a part-time planner. I think this was. didn't
Yes.
say-
Yeah, it's part
So
of
I'm
it.
thinking getting a really top-notch or a good top-notch or a good big firm that has different capabilities within the firm depending upon our goals and our visions.
Right.
They can speak to all those goals and visions.
Right.
I think that's a real plus, and I think a credit to the First Selectman's office to being able to put together the funding, you know. You know, oftentimes we got to build capacity and staff, and it's hard because we want to control costs, but it's hard to get these kinds of things helping us, right? Without, you know, you got to pay. And so I think they put together some funding, not only just from our taxpayers, but funding from other sources to put that together. And
Right. Like the bar grant, you know, to go out and
yeah, those kinds of things.
with
So
the
I
country
think
club.
so. I think that's another thing that speaks good that you're not getting a part-timer that's
Right.
sort of
Right.
I'm-
And then
I'm
there's
a way
also
out.
you know, Dale filling in some of the
Yep.
gaps here. We're
Right.
looking at that as well. So
And it looks like we're gonna give them enough time to at least get a feel, they get a feel for us, we get a feel for them, so a year and a half. would be-
yeah, I mean
so,
the proposal
retain-
that they
yeah.
had was 12 months, right?
Oh, okay.
And you know, in a lot of cases, the consulting work is very front loaded, right?
Right.
So there are all those things that you need to.
Okay.
Did you get a sense that they were plugged in with different kinds of economic partners that we'd be looking for once our town, not we, you know, but once our town decides, you know, what's our vision and our goal for our town for developing community and economics? Did you get a sense that they also can be a good source for maybe, they've dealt with other economic partners and for other towns and ones that come in and like, if they build a theme park, they know Disney, or if they've, you know, if they know the Smithsonian, if they have a museum district or something like that,
Right.
that they've, you know, so once we come up with our vision,
Yes.
they may help.
I mean,
Connect.
again, that's, you know, they're multifaceted and based here in Connecticut and have a lot of experience there. And you know, the email I sent out to all of you today on this, like this, you know, housing and schools, right? I mean, bullseye, right? And who's leading that conversation is Don, who's going to be working on our project.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, it's so when I saw that, I was pretty excited.
Okay.
So, all right.
Good.
Okay, next agenda item, and sticking to the agenda, we did want to talk about TPZ engagement, right? So I had asked Scott, he's very well versed in zoning, to kind of give us an overview, you know, the business district, right, which is where a lot of where we're focused right now, but also, you know, a general primer on kind of the town.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, but I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't know that I'm well versed, but
Okay.
but I think we need to be well versed, and
Right.
so I think as we listen, one thing that was helpful to me is I've started for the last few months trying to just understand when they throw around whether it's our zoning enforcement officer or planning and zoning or a consultant, they throw around terms like, what do you think about Dev 1 and what should we do in Dev 1? And I'm going, Dev 1, what is Dev 1, you know? So maybe I just thought, as we start, helpful to get on the same jargon page so then when we start talking about how you think of things. So that's our town of Woodbridge, right? Can you see my cursor moving
Yes.
around?
Can you zoom this at all?
Well, I can. I'm gonna take you in as we come.
Okay.
But I'm gonna just, if you see the cursor up there, let's look at the towns we border. Bethany up on the top there, up in the north, right? We got on the west side, we got Ansonia. We got Derby where I'm flickering there. We got Orange there. We got New Haven, and we got Hamden. So we do have a lot of towns on our border. That's as we see this property, of our town. For instance, that is owned by the state of Connecticut. That's 20-some acres. That's at the West Rock Ridge Park.
Okay.
But, so that's our town, and those are, you know, it was informative to me to see how many towns we border and maybe how many different perspectives we have, you know? Bethany, Ansonia, Orange, Derby, Hamden, and New Haven. So we may be more unique than others. So let's zoom in.
I think one of the challenges when you look at the map that way, right, is we know the commercial development in Hamden and the commercial development in Orange, right? And we're sort of sandwiched in between, you know, those two towns that have pretty much have one of everything,
Right.
right? That may be contributing to some of the why Woodbridge.
So I just thought, so our really focus, right, is looking at our business districts. And so there's our business districts. So our business districts, if you can follow my cursor, consist of BI, Dev 1 there, so Dev 2 there, GB and GBA. Those are our business districts. BI, Dev 1, Dev 2, GB, and GBA. So let's sort of orient ourselves. So GBA, that's an overlay district. They had a general business district, but our planning and zoning, they did an overlay, and GBA is a little bit different. It has a little bit more things that can be done within there, or restricted, but more things that can be done in there in this case, over our general business district. So the general business district is west of Amity Road there, and only goes up a little bit past Bradley Road, because there's Bradley there.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the GBA is Hazel Terrace and Selden. BI is, I believe, that's the car dealership and probably the brewery and that kind of stuff. In 2030, that's the L. Follow the cursor.
Right.
That's the L. And
So GB and BI are no residences, right?
so yeah, I'm gonna just go over the terms. Yeah, that's right. There's very limited mixed use in the terms of residential use versus business use, right? And so mixed, not like business and industrial, but residential use and business use, using that mixed in that sense. There is really very limited mixed use in the business district, but let's just look at them first. So Dev 2 is obviously, that's all like east of the West River, pretty much, I think. I could be wrong on this, and I took this from the zoning ordinances.
That's all the industrial park.
Yeah, that's the industrial
Right.
park.
And I think it's actually east of the river. So in other words, as you can see, there's something called BB. There is some other non-business district. Those are the houses on Litchfield Turnpike. Those are residential houses in a BB zone. Luciani Street and Lawrence Street and all those. So there's houses there. And there's a C district, for instance, those are houses in there. But
Right.
the actual Dev 2, which is a business district for us to focus on, is on that side of the West River. And it's pretty low over there. Dev 1, right, is north and south of Bradley Road. Except as you can see, can you see where my cursor is? Do you see there's two little B, that's a BB zone there. So there are two homes, two residential use houses, and they're single family that are in there. So I don't know how they got zoned for that, whether they weren't pre-existing uses, but
Right.
I don't want to get into zoning. I'm just trying to, so we're
Well,
all
that's-
familiar with how things work.
That's close to where Toll Brothers.
Right, Toll
across the
Brothers,
street, yeah.
Toll Brothers is on both sides of the street there,
Right.
and they've developed the south side, and they own the north side. And for instance, to the to the east of those two homes, I think Toll acquired those two lots. Those were homes too, and they acquired those. So, yeah, that's right smack dab in the center of Toll. That's the hole in their donut. As you can see, my cursor's there. That's a lot of our nice development that we have some businesses and that sort of thing on Bradley Road. And then GB, okay. So what I did was just, not talking about them too much, about, Tony handed out a sheet, and, you know, always if we focus on these, because I think understanding where they are and how they're located and what, or if anything needs to change, I think we need to sort of understand the different neighborhoods and different zones and what's required in there. When it comes to mixed use, residential, the only residential use that's allowed is in Dev 1 and Dev 2 if it's an active 55-plus community, multifamily. So you can't have a single family, and it can't be anything other than a 55 active community. So somebody might say, well, why did Toll Brothers build a 55 active community in Dev 1? You know, why didn't we have it for people that are 40 years old, or, you know, or something like that? Well, that's our zoning. Our
Right.
zoning is residential use in a business zone, mixed, right? Yeah, it's mixed. Residential land is only multifamily in Dev 1 and in Dev 2, but only multifamilies, active 55 plus, so it's limited mixed use. So that's so it's not none, but it is, some people might say
Limited
it's
to 55 plus.
it's close to none.
And then
but
55 plus active, right? So how do we think about the assisted living? Is that all considered?
I don't know, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm just trying to get us acclimated to
Yeah.
our business zones and where they are, and then,
Right.
you know, obviously the experts on the zoning and our planning and zoning will help us, but we just need to, I think, know that we don't have residential use unless it's limited by active 55 plus, and multifamily. Now, I'm gonna say one exception. They did do the planning and zoning did do a GB overlay in the GBA. Mixed use doesn't have to be active 55 in that small part of the little lower part of the L. That in the GBA, you can have multifamily, you know, non-active 55s. So it's not limited by 55 actives.
In GBA.
In GBA, that overlay. So they did expand that to allow more housing, residential use, more mixed use in that. I will also say that the only, in mixed use, you know, a lot of times it can be vertical or horizontal, and this is where we'll have to talk to our experts and educate us on all this stuff. But obviously if it's vertical, right, you'd have your, you know, your down storefront, right, your retail storefront, and the apartment above, right, vertical. So you can have vertical excuse me, you can have only vertical in Dev 1. You can't have horizontal. So you can't have a residential multifamily thing and then a business thing over here, 2 buildings. But you can have mixed use. I mean, you can't have it, but you can have vertical. In Dev 1, you can have both vertical and horizontal. It's an interesting, you know, why did it get that way? I don't want to make any opinions or say anything. I'm just trying to say about where's residential use allowed. Obviously, in the other zones that we don't talk about because they're not business zones, you see B up there to the west side of Amity Road. That's a residential zone. And all the other stuff in Woodbridge is an A zone, and there's no businesses allowed in those. So they're not mixed use at all.
Right now, there's no businesses.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no mixed use, you know, there's no business use in the A's, the B's, the C's. So that's sort of how the mixed use is sort of interacting.
So Scott, you said that under the Dev 2, there's only vertical.
That's my read on it. I'm subject to being, you know, wrong, but I mean, the bottom line is it's still 55 active.
Yeah.
Still 55 active, but
That'll all be in our town planning and zoning regulations.
and any revamping that
Yeah.
the consultants think needs to be done,
Yeah.
depending on the plans. Yeah. But I just wanted to get us, when they're starting to talk about, well, what's allowed in Dev 1, Dev 2, you know, BI, you know, I mean, BI's got, you know, no, and it's interesting to see BI is on the other side of the Merritt. It's one of the few properties in town that's on the other side of the Merritt. If we talk about integrating within our regions, right, We have no business community on any other bordering side of our town, except, right, except maybe Hamden here, but, you know, that's a mountain, that's
it's
a
up-
cliff.
Yeah, it's up
I mean,
against
you gotta
West
parachute
Rock,
down.
Not much to do.
And then, but that over there where my cursor is, you know, that's on the New Haven border, and that is on the other side of the Merritt. Everything else is all residential, you know, there's very little on the other side of the Merritt. These have been protected on the orange side, and there's no business in there, so.
Okay.
So put that into perspective. If you zoom out, the entire town, you know, what is that? A tenth, if that,
Right.
of the entire
Oh.
town is that little tiny zone,
Right.
a clumped
Yeah,
up zone.
that's not
so-
even a tenth of that.
Yeah, and then somewhere over to the left or wherever, maybe that big white spot down there is the country club, which is another 150 something acres of potential.
That, yeah.
But there's no mixed use there.
This, yeah. that's
Correct.
Right.
That's a residential A zone.
Yeah.
And these allow very limited residential use in their business zones. I mean, so there's no business allowed up here, and there's no, so, I mean, there's there's tracks all over the place, and they're big.
Yeah.
That are confined to each other. It's just the way it is. We need to know that, not that what we do about it is gonna be for the town to decide.
Is there a T1 though next to that? Am I reading that?
Yeah,
correctly?
there's a
Spot?
I was watching the zoning, they're working on, I've been watching the hearings on TV, they're working on, like, I think those T zones, those transect zones are gonna be undone, they're gonna have a public hearing shortly, I think, I heard them in a meeting. They were like sort of transitional zones to talk about how they transitioned from, I guess, the New Haven side, urban side, but we also border Ansonia, that's not so necessarily urban on that side, and the Bethany side's not so urban. So I don't know how transect zone was designed to be a buffer for urban, but, I think they don't know that they carry any significance, and we'll have to wait for P and Z to say T1s and T2s as to what they are. I don't think there's any different use requirements in them.
Right.
They're just sort of transect areas. And by the way, I should say, and I'm not trying to advocate, but any residential use in our business zones, remember, they're limited to 55 actives, right? And then they could be limited vertical or horizontal, and limited to not the single family, to multifamily. But to get that approved, I should have mentioned this, is that to get them approved, it requires a special exception. So there are basically three ways you can get zoning approval. You know, you still gotta comply with the building code, you still gotta make sure a property's safe, is my understanding. You know, safe for the environment and stuff like that, you can't, and the building code, it's gotta be, all done to code. But to get a zoning permit to say you comply with the zoning to put it in there, there's a couple of ways you can do that. There's over-the-counter permits, right? Our zoning says, come on in, get a permit, pay your money, feed generator, pay your money, you get a permit, we'll build it. Building code, you gotta comply with, safety, all that stuff, everybody's gonna look at it, but you get a permit. The other kind is show me your site plan.
Right.
So show me this big plan, spend a gajillion dollars, nothing wrong with that, but so the town's made a decision that these require a third level. And
Right.
that is, you can't do it by permit over the counter, and you can't do it by site plan. You have to actually come in and have a hearing and have public comment, potentially, and have a notice and then the standard for review of a special exception, I think, again, we'll hear this from our zoning people, but special exceptions are safety, and there's a little bit more discretion. I'll leave it at that because I'm not an expert, but
Right.
it's not
But
like.
special exceptions are probably the lowest, least restrictive, right? Like in terms of the investment in getting site plans and.
No, special exceptions are the highest.
I think they could span the gamut.
It's the biggest cost.
for-
In other words,
okay.
getting a permit is just paying the permit fee.
Right.
Site plan is a lot more drawings and so forth.
Okay.
And then, because that requirement costs a lot of money. And then the third hardest one to get approved is gonna be your special exception, your special permit.
Okay.
Those require hearings and so forth. Public, people might not like what you're building, there's all sorts of, and so it's gotta be, public health and safety.
Right.
People might argue, traffic studies, all sorts of things may go into that, like we say, traffic studies and stuff. And I'm not saying that's not good, but in our business district, if you're gonna put residential use, you have to go through all that when there's gonna be those hoops. I know that we gotta factor that in when it comes to, does that attract investment? Over-the-counter permits is easy, special
Right.
exceptions is harder.
Right.
But maybe special exceptions are necessary for residential use. I
So
don't
there's
know.
an overlay to all of this that details, if you're going to do this, then it triggers that next level. So in a lot of, Scott, you can blow it back
I'm
up.
going to.
You look at where, down in, I guess BI is like where DeAndrea's Plaza, right, is located. I've seen the chart that shows like if you want to put retail that's more than 1,500 square feet, it's going to trigger like a special type of permit or whatever. Like 1,500 square feet is nothing. Okay, and you look at something like Grimaldi's, which is 4,000, right? So for that to be done, required action on the part of the town. It wasn't like an over-the-counter, like Scott was saying, right? So a little more friction for a developer to come in versus.
Yeah, and I'm not making any judgment, I'm just
Right.
saying, we need to just understand permit, site plan, special exception
Right.
for approval of our zoning. And so, mixed use, residential use in our business zones is all by special permit, which is the same word as special exception, interchangeable. So you need a special permit for any residential use, and obviously it's just not even permitted in any respect for the mixed use the other way, business in an A zone, in the residential zones, there's no business use, and there's no provision for any of those three processes to get approved. Yeah.
So, one of the things, we have the 2030 work, right? And we've now got a town planner, and we've got a POCD, right? And things are all kind of coming to the same point, right? So I think it's going to require more engagement on zoning. As I've said, like when we go to zoning, it has to be more than just, we want to partner with you. It needs to be like, this is an example, right? This is what we're looking to do. So I think 2030 helps with that a little bit. Like it's a little more tangible for us to start those conversations, and then a POCD, will also, we can kind of fold this into the planning.
Yeah, I might say that I was looking at the placemaking that 2030 put up from Peary Associates, and they talk about incremental. So we don't ever want to scare people, right? It's all going to be accretive, right? It's all going to be as gradual as we, this is not like, throwing everything at you all at once. But
Right.
They talk about incremental, but they talk about densifying. Their theory and their thought coming out of that 2030 was densify the L. But I think if you densify the L, if you remember, you're going to be getting into, what zone is that? Here's the quiz. The BI.
The BI, yeah.
And so BI, you can't have, if you're going to densify it, you're only going to densify it with businesses, unless you change
Right.
the zoning to allow some residential use.
Right.
Right.
But that's, mixed development is at the heart of a lot of what Peary, the placemaking, the big component of it, so.
So, and then the other thing I thought it would be good to ground us in just an understanding, because we're going to hear it a lot when the consultants do all this stuff, is to look at this town map. Can you see sort of the black outline of our town again?
Yes.
Just helpful to understand the blue shading there. That's the public water supply watershed. Now, this is my own map, so it might have a little bit of errors here and there, but I took it from like deep. And so this is the mapping of our water classifications in our town. So when we talk about, we got public water supply watershed, and that's right, we do. We have drinking water that we gotta protect. You can see our reservoirs up, if you can follow my cursor, up in the Bethany area here, and you can see all this blue stuff, and that's the public water supply watershed. And it plays into the zoning, we'll find out, it plays into the zoning very heavily, and is very important to consider when we do our zoning. But on the white map, and this is also, I think, also reflective, there was a recent infrastructure map put up as an amendment to the zoning. It hasn't made it into the regulations that are online yet. It's in a resolution form, but it'll make it into those when I've been watching on TV. But they lay out the infrastructure a little bit, because the public water supply watershed turned out to be pretty important in those amendments. And so I thought it would be helpful just to see where that actually is when somebody says, well, what about our public water supply watershed? And you gotta think about where it is. So you can see it's blue here down by the golf course and the nature preserve. The I don't know what color is that, I'm colorblind, orange? Orange. That is like contaminated water or something, or not very good. I shouldn't say contaminated, but it's not like really meets the quality standards that you need. But you can see Lake Maltby down here where the cursor is, and so all the watershed, the blue up there. There's a little bit of blue in the golf course, you can see it, but it's mostly in white. And then it's like around Pease Road, because this is Pease Road here.
Yeah.
This is, just helpful to know where it is, because we're gonna hear, I think, the term when we start to look at the POCD, protecting the public water supply watershed, and that is the DEP's map.
Okay.
So what I decided to do was helpful to also understand, because I always wonder, what are they talking about, the public water supply watershed? And they being anybody. And I thought I'd show you two more things. Oh, gosh. Oh, bear with me one sec. I think I screwed it all up and I won't be able to show you. I'm gonna make this a layer. Presto changeo. So there is our, so now we know where the public water is, right? Watershed water supply. That's the land where the water collects and runs off, and that's the surface water watershed. And I'm not an expert, so I'm just trying, we're gonna hear these concepts, so we need to learn from them by experts, because I could be a bit wrong on this stuff. But that's basically from the map that I took from the zoning, planning and zoning, because they finally started to try to come up with a map. You can't get the public water, that's your regional water authority water lines. You can't get those maps because they're, unless you're really doing something, because of terrorism, Homeland Security. They don't want you to, where's all your water pipes? I'm gonna put all the, that's a Homeland Security thing. So our maps are a little imprecise, but basically you can see the area. So you can see in our business districts, remember where they were, right? We have public water down there. Goes all the way up to Lake Dawson, right? And then it goes all the way up Amity Road, goes up Center, all the way out to Ansonia. And it comes down Beecher, all the way to our, see where my cursor is? It comes all the way down to our Beecher Road School. So that's the way that pipe is going, plus right there. So we have water there as well. And that is services, obviously, this area, coming up Fountain. So there's a pump station there. So that's our public water. So once, so the zoning is gonna say, well, if you have public water, then you're not really, you're not as worried about, you don't have to have your private well contaminated, right? So that may affect some of the health and safety concerns that you have. So knowing where our infrastructure is, if we ever needed to make changes to it, but knowing basically where it is, I think is gonna be really useful for us to understand where our public water is. Whether it needs to be changed or not is for the vision. I just wanna know that we know where it is. Last thing I wanna show you is this one. And this one may be fun. So, this one is our public sewer. So do you see where it goes? So where my cursor is, it comes up Fountain, where it changes its name to Ansonia Road, State Highway, takes a left on Woodfield, and goes down into the country club. When it continues on, that's orange there, that's a pumping station, so these are little arrows. If you can, these are arrows, so it shows you, arrows means gravity fed. So these are our, and this is the best map I could get from the Greater New Haven Pollution Water Control, or Water Pollution Control Authority, because we sold our sewers years ago to them, to the regional folks. And so those are the arrows, they're gravity fed, so they go downhill, but here, from here to here where my cursor is going, there's a PS right there where my cursor is, there's a pumping station there. So the discharge of the effluent comes out of Beecher Road School, essentially, almost up to right? Almost, it goes all the way up to Rimmon Road, but doesn't cross it, right? And it goes right by the Beecher Road School, then it goes down to a pumping station, then it doesn't go downhill because it's being pumped, it's going uphill there, it's being pumped. And then it meets up with the downhill stuff and goes down Fountain Street into New Haven. And then likewise, I thought it was useful to understand, and this may go into what infrastructure we need depending upon what we build, because it depends on 8-inch, 10-inch, I'm not an expert, but I'm guessing, like, if you're gonna really have an ambitious plan, you may need a 12-inch pipe versus a 10 or an 8, or who knows, you know? And so infrastructure analysis on all this stuff, and that's, I just wanted to show you sort of that area of where our sewer comes in to our high school. So
Right.
that's coming into our elementary, and our high school comes up, there's Litchfield Turnpike, and all the down arrows there. There's Amity Road, it does not go up Amity Road. Our sewers do not go up Amity Road, they stop there. They go downhill from, right around, they go right around Bradley. They go downhill from Amity into here. So that may mean a different size pipe, who knows, you know? That may be a smaller pipe. I have no idea. This is the stuff we need to think about for our experts. And then our sewer, right, goes here, it goes through the Bradley Road area, goes through Coachman's, right, up Luciani's farm, crosses Amity, goes up to, I forget the name of used to be, I think, the Linden, I'm not quite sure, right, Linden? Then it goes there, JCC, you can see that arrow, let me get it bigger. See that arrow that's going downhill this way? That's the JCC right there. So the JCC's hooked up into the sewer, the Linden, you know, all these down here at Coachman's, and they go down Litchfield Turnpike sewer, not Fountain and not Amity. And then it comes across Pease, and it stops. You can see that's Amity Road and Pease. It stops right there. So you may be saying, how do I get a sewer from where my cursor is in Amity High School down to that pipe? There's a private line, they pump it from Amity High School, they pump it down here and through Pease, and they pump it through a long private line into that sewer from there. So the sewer main ends there, and it's all private to get the high school line. So I always thought sewer came up to center our town, you know? So we have no sewer, public sewer, up on the center of our town. It comes in kind of through the side, through Amity High School. So helpful to understand where our sewers are, so when somebody's starting talking about what you can develop or you can't develop, knowing where our sewers are and our infrastructure, I think is going to be really important to understand what people are telling us.
So the water in the sewers helps us develop more dense population. So you can't put, if you're in a well area, you can't put lots of apartment complexes, let's say, because there's restrictions on getting the waste to your septic. So that's where you see more ability to get apartment complexes.
And I would think also, and not an expert in this, right, but the lack of sewer means you have to have a septic, which means you naturally have to have larger properties. Right, so that all probably plays in.
Yeah, I'm not going to
our
go too
zone.
far. I'm going to let the
Yeah.
experts and the
Right.
town opinion and the
Right.
vision force us. I mean, not force us, but
Yeah.
forge the vision. But I think it's really helpful to know where this stuff is, so we don't just keep saying, you know, bring the sewer up, or don't bring the sewer up.
Right.
Protect the public. We need to know where this stuff is and what it really is. And then when we're hearing it, you know, because like, for instance, I've been doing a lot of reading, like sewer avoidance, what is that and stuff. But that's sort of to try to listen to what our consultants and planners and the community is saying.
Right.
So I just want to know where the stuff is.
Right.
And then.
Well, but you had the insight the other night about, you know, here we are looking at 2030.
Right.
Right. And it's like,
Right
well, if we
in the middle
consider
of
that there's a
Amity Road.
sewer line that runs right through here, and, you know, no disrespect to anybody at all. I mean, it was just like, yeah, we need to consider this. Right?
But that's our, you know, so when we say infrastructure,
Yeah.
now we can really find out where is the sewer, how big is it, when was the last time it was lined? you know, oh, well, that's gonna cost us too much, you know,
Right.
all those things come into play, right?
Yeah, we figure out how much it's gonna cost us.
And then some people from the conservation community are gonna say, yeah, but you know, there's a movement to, you know, to really, anyway, you know, I think everybody, but we're gonna be able to listen to that better if we just have sort of got these existing things, and that's what they did in the last amendment. They made this map, and they basically made this map. I just tried to enhance it to see the flows of the sewer with the arrows a little bit more. Theirs was just like shaded like the water is there. I tried to show you the exact directions of the sewer pipes because they don't have the same terror. Poop is not as concerning. You don't usually the poop line that you don't poison, the water line you poison. So I can't get the water line map, but I can get the sanitary map because nobody cares as much about that. So anyway, that was all I wanted to
Excellent.
get us thinking.
No, it's great to
Oh,
have the
thank you.
grounding in this, Scott, and especially now, you know, we fold in 2030, we fold in the town planner and the POCD, right? And when you see the zoning, it brings the challenge to life, right? Like the slivers that we really have to work with down in the business.
Yeah, then we can get the real experts to tell us, okay, here's what's actually, you know, let's have the whole zoning ordinance, so we can look at uses in the particular zones, everything from, you know, animals to firearms to
Right.
movie, you know, everything you can imagine and types of, so, but the bottom line is we know where the zones are, and I think our biggie to understand is mixed use. That's our biggie from, to know.
Yeah.
The consultant's not gonna be limited by those zones, right? Like are they gonna present options for changing our zoning requirements to meet what the town?
I think that's a
may
big
want?
part of the job, right? But
Yeah.
you can lead with that, right? To try to affect some change, and you know, they're all choices. You know, like so. All right. So in terms of new business, I really didn't have anything too much on here, Tony. The only thing that comes to mind was call it the tennis bubble, right? And that the exact address, but it's down in the industrial
Animal
park,
control.
right?
Yep.
So the tennis bubble was sold recently, and you know, we're trying to track down a little more details onto whom and what are the next, you know, what are the potential uses for that? And I
Right.
know the Woodbridge Rec has expressed a little interest in that and trying to connect with them. So, but I mean, other than that, like on new business, I didn't really have anything else. Public comment. Here we are, and so then the next meeting. So in June, we are gonna have a presentation. It was supposed to happen in May. It actually got pushed to June from CEDAS, which is the Connecticut Economic Development, and Ginny Kozlowski will come in and share that plan and vision with us. And I think they are required to go to every town with that.
I think that's what Dale said.
Right.
He was here last time.
Right. So we will have Dale with us next time. Anything else? No? All right.
One question.
Yeah.
Has anybody gone to local businesses and started questioning them like we talked about a few sessions back?
So not since our last meeting. No.
I'm asking not because I did anything, but
Right.
if people did and they have questions that they've been asking, maybe we can kind of share the questions so we can all go out with like the same set of questions and glean the same type of information. And
You know, I would like to. I think that's going to be part of Goldman's project scope, most
Okay.
likely. But I want to see where this nets out. If it doesn't, then I think we take a more active role in that.
Okay.
Right. Part of this is I don't want to duplicate
Right.
efforts. I mean, I would imagine they're going to want to get in and talk to, you know, to some of the businesses in town.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm also, I mean, this is just my own personal thinking, you know, not that I've heard anything, but I bet that consultant may lead us to thinking about what's our driver, you know, is it amusement parks, is it this, when I went to that, meet the commissioner, fireside chat, I was up in Old Weathersfield, and they had all these museums, and all these old Revolutionary sort of war, you know, places, and restaurants and things, you know. So I think that may drive some of our communications if we felt that that was our economic driver was to develop a historic district with restaurants and we all dress up in, 1780s. I'm just teasing. I
Right.
don't know that it's going to be our driver.
Right.
But that may affect, if we go out, it may be a bit premature because we may be looking for economic partners, right? That know
Right.
how to build and rehab historic buildings or build amusement parks or whatever the thing is
Yeah.
our driver. So, I mean, because some of it could, well, who
No,
knows?
it's a
There's
great
gonna be a lot-
example.
once you know that, then you know how to sort of approach them and, because it doesn't seem like planned at this point. down
So Old Weathersfield said, this is what we want to be, right? And then everything flowed towards that vision, right? I mean, what we do, what we don't do. I mean, this is all one-on-one stuff, I know, but it's a great example. Somebody started with, this is what we want this to look like long-term, so we know what we won't have here, and we know what we want.
Yeah, I saw on the
to
bottom of the TV today, Governor Lamont signs like tourism bill or something, to get
Okay.
going. I'm just saying, I mean, there's,
Yeah.
you never know what comes out of the process because of what you think your economic driver is, and then you come up with your plan.
Right. Okay. All right, so if we have a motion to adjourn,
I shall move.
Second.
Cliff seconds. All in favor? All right. June 13th.